Hello, my name is Shimona, and welcome to my Battle for Azeroth Frost Mage DPS guide. In this video, we are going to talk about what it is to be a Frost Mage, the changes kind of coming into Legion, which talents you should be using, some resources that you can use to figure out your stat weights, which trinkets you should be using, which Azerite traits you should be using, as well as just to figure out your overall DPS and some resources to help you get better at your class even after this video has gone out of date. To start off with, coming into BFA, Frost Mages can no longer reach their crit cap. So if you don't know how Frost Mage works, Frost Mages have this talent, or passive talent, called Shatter. So it multiplies the critical strike chance of your spells against frozen targets by 1.5 and adds an additional 50% crit chance. So if you have a 33% crit chance, you multiply that by 1.5, it's about 1.7. You add that together, it's 50%, and then you add 50% on top of that. So if you had 33% crit, it means every time you cast a spell against a frozen target, it would crit 100% of the time. But going into BFA, secondary stats are very hard to come by, and it is going to be impossible for you to reach crit cap anytime soon. So that means crit is no longer your highest priority stat. This can be, it might be your highest priority, but throughout this expansion, I've been constantly simming my stats and seeing what stats are better than what. And for the most part, crit has been the most priority, but not by much. And sometimes haste has actually been more relevant than crit. Some other things, Mastery Icicles now increases the damage of your Frozen Orb. So Icicles, every time you cast a Frostbolt or Flurry, that's right here, Flurry, it can create an icicle. Casting Ice Lance causes all your icicles stored to begin launching at the target, dealing 1.181 damage per. Up to 5 icicles can be stored. Any excess icicles gained will be automatically launched. We also have the Fingers of Frost. Frostbolt has a 15% chance, and Frozen Orb has a 10% chance to grant you a Fingers of Frost. Fingers of Frost cause your next Ice Lance to deal damage as if the target were frozen. So this pairs with Shatter. If you have 33% crit, your Fingers of Frost procs will always crit. Brain Freeze, Frostbolt has a 25% chance to empower your next Flurry to be instant cast, deal 50% increased damage, and apply Winter's Chill to the target. Winter's Chill causes the target to take damage from your spells as if it were frozen. So all these kind of combine together under the general rule that you're crit capped or near crit cap. Even though we're not close to crit capped, Frost Mages are still very strong at BFA. I'm not going to say they're the strongest class because they're definitely not, but they aren't definitely not weak. I'm assuming you know all the normal spells. You know, you've got your Frostbolt, generally your filler. You've got your Flurry, you only use when you get a Brain Freeze proc, that's what we talked about right here. You use your Ice Lance only to follow up a Flurry Brain Freeze proc, or you use it when Fingers of Frost is procced. And then you've got your Frozen Orb, it's kind of like a big AoE, generates your Ice Lance procs. And you've got some other things, you've got like the Blizzard, Comet Storm. I'm saying you have a general idea of how Frost Mage works. Okay, now that we've talked over the passives and kind of what it is to be a Frost Mage right now, let's talk about your stat weights. So I said that it's going to be impossible to reach crit cap anytime soon. And it is, but you should still know what you should be prioritizing in gear, and this will actually also help you out with your pawn add-on. So if you're using pawn is an add-on that will tell you which gear is an upgrade, and it'll weight your stats on your gear by a point system. So for every 1 point of intellect, it's 1.73 DPS. For every 1 point of crit, it's worth 1.3 DPS. And every 1 point of haste is 1.23 DPS, and so on, being mastery the most useless and intellect the most useful. But for secondaries, that makes crit the most useful for me at the moment. if I take off a piece of gear, or not take off, but replace it, so let's just put on this chest piece. You can see pawn tells me at the bottom that this gear is a 15% upgrade solely based on stats. It doesn't recognize Azerite power. It doesn't recognize like trinket procs and maybe some other things like trinket sets. It doesn't recognize that. But as for flat stats, this is helpful for a variety of reasons. Now, to generate those flat stats, we're going to use our first resource, which is raidbots.com/simbot. All these websites will be down in the description. On here, you can compare your gear and inventory. You can compare talents. You can sim your DPS, and you can compare your stat weights. So to use this add-on, or not this add-on, this website, we need an add-on called SimulationCraft. So when you download SimulationCraft, go ahead and head here. You're going to want to get Pawn and SimulationCraft. So in game, you want to type simc. It's going to pop up with this box, and what this box is, it's basically all your talents, the gear you're wearing, the gear in your bags, and you know, what race you are, all that kind of stuff. So you can just Control C, copy all that. Come back here, and you're going to want to head over to stat weights. Just go ahead and going to control all this and paste over it. You're going to generate your stat weights. This should only take a couple minutes, not very long, but for the sake of the video, I went ahead and simmed my stats already. This stupid computer will let me drag it over. So these are the same stat weights you saw in Pawn. Hasn't changed since. But when you put them in here, it gives you the pawn string, so you can just copy your pawn string to clipboard. Head back to WoW, go to pawn/pawn. And you want to go to your scales, import, and just control paste that right in there. And there you go. So all you gotta do. So now you have your stat weights. I know that crit is currently my most needed stat. So when you're looking for enchants for your gear, I have haste because at the time I was getting my enchants done and my gems done. Haste was actually my best stat, but since things have changed, crit is back at it again. Another enchant you can get is Torrent of Elements. It's pretty cheap. It was only 10k when I bought it a couple of days ago. By the time you watch this video, it'll probably be down to 5k. Depends on your server. Depends on a lot of things, but that's that. Coming back here, that's still simming. Let's just cancel that. So you can do top gear, kind of sim your gear, do your talents, all that kind of stuff. You can figure it out. I wouldn't bother using the talent compare. Just kind of go on, you know, the WoW forums, alter time. I guess this will lead us straight into our next resource, which is alter time. Alter time is a mage focused forum. So altertime.com, again, it'll be in the description. They have discussion boards for Arcane, Fire, Frost, different add-ons, macros, and UI, as well as you can post your own questions and ask for help. But we're going to head over to Frost since it's the Frost Mage guide. The two things I would suggest you looking at is the Frost Mage Mythic Plus guide. I'm not going to go over Mythic Plus much in this video, but this can be very useful for you if you're not sure. You can also head over to the Glacial Spike guide. That's kind of what the meta is right now in the BFA launch, is Glacial Spike is king. And you've got some other things that I think need to be updated. I'm not sure if this one needs to, but you can take a look here if you don't like watching videos. It'll tell you all you kind of need to know. Talents, rotation. This is exact rotation I do. I've got a couple little tips that they don't include in here, which I think they should, but you know, that's up to them. And now going over Azerite and trinkets, I will head into my last resource, which is bloodmallet.com. So bloodmallet.com, you can come here for all your classes and race or specs needs. We're gonna head over to Frost. Bloodmallet back in Legion only did trinkets, but now they do trinkets, azerite traits, races, and the secondary distribution, which is your secondary stats. The relative percentage is over all of your secondaries. It's not your actual percent that you see in game. So the most optimal percentage, you want half of your secondary stats to be crit. It doesn't mean that your in-game stats are actually gonna be 50%. So I have 771 crit at plus 10.71%. So the optimal, or the most optimal one, would be 1238.5, which will probably be around like plus 18% crit or something like that. So you'd be looking at 23% crit maximum. But yeah, they've got races on here. Oh, they've got patchwork, which is single target, and then they've got hectic ab cleave, which is more than single target. For that, still it's crit, but verse is more important than, I believe, in patchwork is haste. Yeah. They've also got races on here. There's not a big difference for single target. Yeah, like the lowest is 580 to 668. There is a big difference in the ad cleave one though. Lightforged Draenei is 334 above the next class. That is actually quite a huge jump in just erases DPS. But yeah, if you want to get the top charts, you are going to have to be a Lightforged Draenei for AoE, because that is just insane. They've got the azeritetraits on here. Each one of these different colors is a stacking trait. So if you get 3 of them, you get this full 3,434. If you get 1, you only get 1,129. Just helps you kind of add up the scores more. And again, for here, you've got single target, you've got hectic dive cleave, you've got the tier 1, tier 2. You can take a look through this. I'm sure this will change a lot. They've also got item level to kind of help you decide. Perhaps a 370 piece of gear might be better than a 385. 370 with really good traits would be better than a 385 with crappy traits, which is true for this Synaptic Spark capacitor. And then they go into the specific head, shoulder, chest, and all that you can kind of look at. But this is such a great resource right now. They have trinkets as well. You can go through and take a look at this, compare your trinkets. But if you're not sure on trinkets, I would suggest you use raidbots. They currently don't sim Azerite, I don't believe. I'm not sure how that works if they do. You can't. I don't know. I haven't tried simming different Azerite traits in different gear, but as far as I know, you can't do that. So you're gonna have to rely on bloodmallet for the Azerite traits and figure out what's best for you. So with all that behind us, I guess the only thing left we have to talk about is talents and our rotation. The talents in BFA, ignoring PvP because I don't do much PvP, this is what you're going to be looking at. You're going to want bone chilling. Whenever you attempt to chill a target, you gain bone chilling, increasing spell damage you deal by 0.5% for 8 seconds, stacking up to 10 times. This basically just gives you 5% increased spell damage throughout a fight, assuming you never stop casting, which you never should. Shimmer, it's a blink that's unaffected by global cooldown. It gives you 2 charges. Such a great ability. There are some scenarios that Icy Flows might be better, but that just depends on the raid fight. You've got Incanter Flows, it's just passive, changes the increased damage, that's it. Ebon Bolt. Now, Ebon Bolt differs from Legion, as in Legion, you used Ebon Bolt on cooldown no matter what. And you would use Ebon Bolt, you would cast your Brain Freeze proc right after that you get from it, and then Ice Lance into that Brain Freeze. You no longer do that. Ebon Bolt's pure focus and pure reason for existing in Frost Mage is to generate you a Brain Freeze proc for your Glacial Spike. So, that's something new about Ebon Bolt. Tier 75 talents, you can choose whatever you want to. For Mythic Plus, I would just suggest Frigid Winds. It helps a lot if tanks want to kite with your Blizzard. Skipping over tier 90 at the moment. The only tier 100 talent which is useful right now is Glacial Spike. You're going to use this everywhere, raids, Mythic Plus, everything. Coming back to the tier 90, for the most part, any fights that are single target or 3, 4, 5 target, you're going to be wanting to use Comet Storm. There is the option to go splitting ice if you have a pure 2 target in which they're both stacking on top of each other the whole fight. Splitting ice, because splitting ice will make not only your Ice Lance, but your Ebon Bolt and your Glacial Spike will both split and hit a secondary target for 80% of its damage. Again, it's only useful if it's on a 2 target fight in which they're going to be stacking the entire time. And then Freezing Rain, you can use this if you're going to be constantly fighting 6 or more mobs. In Mythic Plus, I wouldn't suggest it because they're kind of hard right now and most tanks aren't pulling more than 3 or 4 at a time. Sometimes you might get a pack of 5, sometimes you might get more, but for the most part, you just want to stick with Comet Storm. You're just going to have to figure out if you've got a good enough tank and you want to go with Freezing Rain. Freezing Rain with 6 or more mobs at one time, you're going to have Frozen Orb up like all the time. Okay, so those are the talents. This is what you should be using single target. There's nothing special here. If you've never used Glacial Spike before, so we talked about our Icicle passive, Mastery Icicles. Every time you cast Frostbolt or Flurry, you'll generate an Icicle. And then whenever you use Ice Lance, it'll dump all your Icicles. Now, if you see here on Glacial Spike at the bottom, it says passive Ice Lance no longer launches Icicles. So your Icicles are always stored up here, and you want to collect 5 of them. So you can get that through a combination of Frostbolt and Brain Freeze procs. And when you get 5, you only want to cast Glacial Spike when you have a Brain Freeze proc. And that's where Ebon Bolt comes into count. If you hit the 5 Icicles, you'll cast the Ebon Bolt, get that Brain Freeze proc, and then you'll go into Glacial Spike, Brain Freeze, Ice Lance. You still want to cast an Ice Lance after every Brain Freeze no matter what. You always want to cast an Ice Lance if you have a Fingers of Frost proc still. And so the priority you're looking at for rotations is you want to cast Fingers of Frost procs. So whenever your Ice Lance lights up, you want to use it. You want to cast your Icy Veins on cooldown. You want to cast your Comet Storm on cooldown. You want to cast your Frozen Orb on cooldown. If you're fighting 2 or more targets that are stacked, you want to cast Blizzard after using Frozen Orb and your Fingers of Frost, all that. But assuming it's single target, you never use Blizzard. So it goes Fingers of Frost, Icy Veins, Frozen Orb, Comet Storm, and then you go into the Frostbolt filler. You will cast Glacial Spike if you have 5 Icicles, basically it'll be lighting up, and a Brain Freeze proc. If you don't have a Brain Freeze proc, you can use Ebon Bolt to get it, and if your Ebon Bolt's on cooldown, you're just going to keep spamming Frostbolt till you get that Brain Freeze proc. It's worth mentioning, there's a couple scenarios where you'll be casting Frostbolt. Let's go ahead and just do that. So let's capital some Frostbolts. So we get up here to 3 Icicles and we get this Brain Freeze proc. The normal instinct would be to, you want to dump your 2 Ice Lances, and now you want to Frostbolt into Ice Lance, but you don't want to do that. You actually want to hold your Brain Freeze. Once you get up to 3, 4 Icicles, you just want to hold that Brain Freeze proc till you get your 5 Icicles. So you would just cast 2 more Frostbolts. You would open up, your Glacial Spike would be available. You'd still have that Brain Freeze from your second Frostbolt, and you would just go straight into it and you do that. And you would reset back at 1 Icicle up here. And so if you get another Brain Freeze proc, like right now I would cast it. But yeah, there's another pro tip you want to know about is, let's say you're at 4 Icicles. So usually when you're playing Frost Mage, you're just spamming your buttons non-stop. Let's assume Ebon Bolt's on cooldown. So we're going to cast a Frostbolt, and we're assuming that Brain Freeze is not going to proc. So we're going into the the Frostbolt, we're going to cast another Frostbolt before our original Frostbolt hits. But there's a chance that mid-second Frostbolt cast that a Brain Freeze procs. So it's actually worth canceling your second Frostbolt or Ebonbolt cast and just going straight into Glacial Spike. So let's see if we hit that Brain Freeze for an example. We did. So we cancel it. Oh, I didn't get my 5th Icicle. But anyways, you cancel that Frostbolt and you just go straight into the Glacial Spike Brain Freeze. Let's try it again. So let's hit 3, 4. So this would be our 5th. We cast another one. We don't have it. Just keep casting until we get one. So we cancel, go straight into our Glacial Spike. And that goes the same thing for Ebonbolt. If you hit that 5 Glacial Spikes and you're fishing for a Brain Freeze, let's go and then cancel that. You're fishing for that Brain Freeze. Now let's say, okay, you're fishing for that Brain Freeze, right? Let me turn that off. You're fishing for that Brain Freeze. You're about to hit the 5th Icicle, right? So you cast a Frostbolt. That Frostbolt hits and it gives you a Brain Freeze, but you're mid-cast of Ebonbolt. You just cancel it. You cancel it, you go straight into Glacial Spike. It's worth doing if you have fast enough reaction time. I'm not sure exactly how fast it needs to be. I think I read 0.3 seconds, which is pretty gosh darn fast. But it's definitely worth doing. Alright, so now that we got all that out of the way, I'm going to go through a rotation after my icicles go out. So on a pull, what we're looking to do is we're going to pre-pull with a Frostbolt. We're going to activate Icy Veins. We're going to activate Frozen Orb. We're going to activate Comet Storm. And then we're going to go into a first Ice Lance, because when your Frozen Orb hits a target for the first time, it grants a Fingers of Frost instantly. So you're guaranteed to have 1 Fingers of Frost. After that, we're just going to go into our rotation of Frostbolt Filler, get this up to 5 stacks, and if we don't have a Brain Freeze, we're going to use our Ebonbolt, yada yada yada. Okay, one thing to mention that I messed up, actually, I was doing rotation. If you're in your Heroism phase with your Icy Veins, don't bother trying to cancel your cast to go straight into Glacial Spike. You can do it if you're that fast, but you're casting your spells so fast, you're better off letting your spells finish casting and just going straight in. Don't worry about wasting that little bit, you know, just stay on your rotation. Once you slow down, you know, your Heroism's up, you're not on Icy Veins, your haste is pretty slow. At that point, you want to start canceling, but just leave that to you. But we're going to go ahead and get started into this. We're just going to do DBM pull 6. So I'm going to cast on 3 seconds, you know, for travel time pre-pull. And we're going to go straight into casting Icy Veins, Frozen Orb, Comet Storm, and our Ice Lances. So now we're just going to start doing our filler. This is 2. Cast that Frost or Fingers of Frost. 4, 5, and you see we casted our Ebonbolt to get our Brain Freeze for Glacial Spike. Unfortunately, that one didn't crit, so now we're filling back up. 2, 3, 4, 5, and now we're looking to cancel like that. So we canceled, go straight into Glacial Spike, Brain Freeze, and our Comet Storm's up, so let's go ahead and do that. And now we're going back into the rotation. 2, 3, 4. Now we're looking to cancel. We're going to leave this Fingers of Frost so we don't have to cancel. There we go. Glacial Spike into Brain Freeze into Ice Lance. Now we start filling up. We're about to have our Frozen Orb off cooldown. Do one more just so we don't waste a bit of a tick. We're about to have our Comet Storm off cooldown. Let's cast Comet Storm. Oh, we should have Ebonbolt right there. I wasn't paying attention. We Ebonbolt into Glacial Spike into Brain Freeze. I should have used that Fingers of Frost before I did it, but I was a bit too slow to notice. See, we're only at 2 stacks, so I'm going to go ahead and consume that Brain Freeze proc. Get us up to 4. That's 5. We're going to cancel. Go straight into Glacial Spike. I should have actually canceled with the Fingers of Frost, but I was a bit too slow there. 2, 3. We're going to hold this one since we're only at 3. Glacial Spike. We should have done Comet Storm. Again, I wasn't paying attention. I'm pretty new to this as well. I should have Comet Storm there as well. So let's go ahead and Comet Storm. Keep Frost Bowling. We're only at 3, 4. And we're looking to cancel. Still looking to cancel. Still looking to cancel. Alright, we're going to Evan Bolt. Okay. Glacial Spike, Brain Freeze, Ice Lance, and then our Frozen Orb. And now we restart. We're at 1, 2. This will be 3. We're going to hold it. 4. We're going to cast these Ice Lances off first. We're going to cast our Comet Storm because it's off cooldown. Now we're going to go to Glacial Spike, Brain Freeze, Ice Lance, and we're restarting. Going to keep going until we finish off this Icy Veins. So we're at 3. We're going to hold it. Glacial Spike into Brain Freeze into Ice Lance. Pretty good. Now we're going back into it. Frostbolt, that's 2. 3. We're going to cast this Brain Freeze because we actually have our Ebon Bolt up. And we're going to go into Comet Storm, Glacial Spike, Brain Freeze, Ice Lance. And we're going to go ahead and end off there because our Icy Veins is almost up. So that's a 3-minute rotation. I hope that kind of makes it pretty clear on what you're trying to do. Again, when you go into Mythic Plus, you want to prioritize your Blizzard into that cooldown. So if I'm going into a Mythic Plus, instead of pre-pulling each pact with a Frostbolt, I might switch out my pre-pull Frostbolt with a pre-pull Blizzard. And I'll Blizzard into a Frozen Orb into Icy Veins, and then use a Comet Storm with my Pet's Freeze ability. So you can actually cast Comet Storm, start casting something, and use your freeze. So let's Comet Storm into Freeze Blizzard. So Comet Storm, Freeze, Blizzard. Just like that. There's a lot of little Mythic Plus tips you can kind of read on that Alter Times website, but I hope this helps you out. If you have any suggestions or recommendations, just anything that I can personally improve on, or maybe other people that I did not mention on the video, maybe other resources, please feel free to leave a comment. I hope this helped. I will try and learn Arcane. I'm very curious because Arcane currently sims as a, like, I think the second highest or maybe the highest single target DPS. But that's patchwork, that's no movement. Yeah. If this helped, please comment, like, and subscribe. And I hope you have fun in BFA.